I'm Paul Hoffschmidt, founder and CEO of Alpha Sophia, and this week I'm joined by Romy Benninga, co-founder of Digital Healthworks and MedTech commercialization expert. Thanks for joining us today, Romy.
Thank you, Paul. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining the pod. So, in the beginning, just tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get into MedTech? What's your journey in that industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it always comes back to my love for biology. I had an amazing biology teacher in high school, and she really kind of started off my fascination with understanding rare diseases and how the human body works, and really understanding on a scientific level how how things are happening and how we can build drugs to fix that. So that was where I think I started, and then I think a lot of people think, okay, I like biology, I like medicine, I'm going to become a doctor. And it wasn't until I think after I graduated from my bachelor degree in biomedicine that I realized that there was this entire industry in medical devices and pharmaceutical companies, and there was an entire industry happening around scientific innovation. Whether you're in the quality control or the research and development side, or obviously the startup world and innovation, through to all of the logistics around healthcare. That was something that then I discovered as I sort of was going through my career and my studies really, and was hooked, from day one with applying the science and understanding how we can really build and improve with innovation.
So you actually started from the scientific side and are now more working on the commercial market access side with companies in the MedTech, digital health, and bioscience space, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, I trained as a biomedical scientist first in the UK, and then did my master's in Switzerland, where I specialized in immunology and oncology, and did a little bit of work in industry in academia. Sorry, just understanding how the research world works, how academia works. But I was always found myself thinking, how can we actually apply this research to patients? How can we make whatever we're finding and we're discovering, oh, this protein is making mitochondria react in a specific way. How can we leverage that? Whether it was through nutrition or whether it was through a new, bioactive compound, how can we build that into a product for patients? Because that's what we ultimately are doing all this research for. So started off my career in research and development in a startup in Switzerland, but quite quickly moved into the more commercial facing roles, because I really enjoyed understanding from, I think, the end users, which a lot of the time were the healthcare practitioners, the physicians who were using the products, understanding from them exactly what they were looking for, what their challenges on a day-to-day were, and how us coming from industry, coming from the scientific side, how we could actually build products that would be useful for them. And that was where I became fascinated with the commercial facing side of startups, and sort of got entered into that whole world.
And that has then also led you to found Digital Healthworks, which is a commercialization agency for MedTech and digital health companies, I assume.
Yes, exactly. So Digital Health Works. So that was about a year and a half ago. I think it really came out of seeing how amazing technologies were being built all over the place. And I spent about a year in Boston, which anyone who knows Boston is just an incredible hub for MedTech and innovation. And you've got people coming out of MIT and Harvard with incredible training, and then you've got all this incredible ecosystem of investors and VCs and ex CEOs who are just keen to mentor the new generation, and that environment was just so ripe for innovation. And I started coming across a lot of companies that were founded, by medical doctors or by PhD scientists who had developed something incredible, and then were thinking, okay, great, my device is going to save a life. How do I actually get it to market? How do I build a business around this? And that's where I saw that there were a lot of challenges, because this industry, for someone who's not in commercializing in healthcare, it's an incredibly challenging environment, because on one hand you have all of the regulatory constraints. So everyone's heard of the FDA, and in Europe we've got the EMA that is regulating the way that technologies or devices are entering the market and how they're being presented to patients. So on one hand you have all of these regulatory guardrails, and then on the other, you have the healthcare systems that are incredibly complex. So it's not just about, oh, how can I market my device or my product and make doctors interested in it? It's really about understanding the entire complexity of that system. So all the different stakeholders, from patients to caregivers, through to the physicians and the hospital, logistics and staff, all the way down to then different players like distributors or manufacturers, and this entire ecosystem around the healthcare system, like the insurance and reimbursement. That is incredibly complicated, and it's very different in different countries. Even within Europe, there's a lot of differences between the different countries, even though it's still within the EU. So I think starting to understand that world is really, I find it very interesting, and helping founders who are incredibly talented at building these devices that are going to save lives. We essentially at Digital HealthWorks saw that there was a gap to support them in the regulatory and making sure that they were addressing all of the needs of the end users, and making sure that they were able to not only build a product that would solve an issue for a patient and a physician, but make sure that someone was going to be willing to pay for it, because that's something that at the end of the day, we're all here, we all have these great ideas of helping patients and saving lives, but if you can't build a business, if it's not profitable, if it's not sustainable, that technology is not going to make it into the hands of patients. And that's, I think, what drove us to founding Digital HealthWorks, along with my co-founder, who also had a very similar experience coming more from the software side. And so with my experience in devices, I think we were really like, wow, there's a gap here, and anyone who's done it once and who has that experience has immense value to a first-time founder, or to anyone who's really trying to innovate in the field, essentially. So not just startups.
I can imagine. I mean, especially in the medical space, there's such a long time companies remain in the R&D phase, then development, prototyping, finding manufacturing partners, quality, regulatory, and so on. And then it comes really late when the commercialization part actually kicks in compared to other businesses. This is like, I don't know, normal software business, for example. And I can imagine that this mindset shift with those operators, those founders and inventors, is also quite a complex topic to get done, and basically shift the gear towards commercialization when the company is ready for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's expensive, building something in MedTech is incredibly expensive. From regulatory applications, I mean, if we're thinking about the FDA, that's costing you millions. And so that's a significant part of any money that any, early stage company is going to be raising. Significant amount of that is going to go towards the regulatory. So it can be very easy to think, all right, getting my FDA approval is the only important thing because it's costing me millions and millions. And because that's what I need. Once I get that approval, I can go to market. And the commercial aspect can sort of be, a little bit underestimated, especially, when the device that's being developed is something that the founders have encountered personally as an issue, or, they've seen that there's a need directly in the market. But spending the time to take a step back and sort of critically validate those assumptions, and making sure that, okay, if you think that this is an issue and two other people you spoke to also think it's an issue, speak to 100 more physicians, or speak to 100 more people who are also involved in that process, and try and understand exactly what is the problem that you're solving, and is there basically economic value in that? Because at the end of the day, those are the decisions, and that's the kind of information and data that decision makers at hospitals and anyone who's going to be buying your technology is going to be looking at. So absolutely, I think it's complicated and it's expensive and it's a long process. So at Digital HealthWorks, we kind of just try and make that a little bit easier by approaching it in a systematic way, and making sure that the critical steps are being done, that the regulatory strategy makes sense, that they're developing a product that has a target market that's going to be, profitable in maybe 2, maybe 5, maybe 8 years, but that has that path to revenue, and that we're able to follow the money and see exactly who's going to be paying for it and how that's going to happen, because that can be underestimated a lot.
Speaking of that, what do you think are strategies that MedTech startups launching a new product to market need to have to succeed? So what's the secret sauce or usually advise your clients on?
Yeah, I think, oh, that's a difficult one, because it's, I don't think there's any one, three strategy wins all, but I think definitely the team. We see that more often than not, and it's not really something that we can advise on necessarily, but it's more, I think, a key factor to success is the team and the dynamics between the team, and making sure that everyone that is working in that company is fully focused on the same goal. And that alignment is really, really crucial. And then secondly, I think making sure that you have competencies within your team that can target all of your key areas of need and the areas that are the highest risk for failure. So that being, regulatory, making sure that you have a path to reimbursement, making sure that you're able to fundraise correctly, and making sure that you have a business and a strategy in place to take your company to the next level. And if you don't have those competencies in-house, being open to looking outside, to bringing them in, because I think that's crucial. Is one brain can be incredible, but 10 is always much better. And then the third one I would say is your target market. Just validating your target market and making sure that you are indeed building something that's going to be useful to people, that is going to be used, and that's going to make a difference to the bottom line of whoever you're trying to sell it to.
Yeah, I fully agree. But then again, I mean, even if those components come together, you mentioned that at the beginning, launching a product to the healthcare market is extremely complex and difficult to succeed there. So what are typical challenges or traps you see companies run in when they start developing, but then also executing their market access strategy?
Yeah, I think it's difficult, and especially in the environment that we're in today, fundraising is tends to be the biggest reason why companies fail. I think more than 95% of startups in the medical device industry fail. So fundraising is obviously a challenge. But then I think underestimating the market is the big one. We see a lot of companies focusing and spending a lot on R&D and getting caught up in wanting to continuously innovate and improve their product. And I understand it. As a scientist, it's exciting because you're discovering all these new things. It's impossible for someone to just say, okay, now stop. Let's really make sure that this one works. I mean, it takes almost more than a year to go through some of the regulatory processes. So that's being able to put the innovation on halt and really make sure that the product that you've built is ready and good to go to market, I think can be a challenge sometimes, because it's easy to just continue spending money on R&D. So yeah, I think that's
so getting that timing right to also start phasing in commercial activities and market launch strategies, and don't not sticking only on that R&D and regulatory train forever. And then,
exactly.
Of course, I mean, getting the funding to finance all of that, and we all know how difficult that can be, especially in the current environment.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think the sort of concept of commercialization or sort of product market fit, everyone always, hears these terms, they get thrown around in every accelerator. They always have to have a commercial strategy, and that's great. And it's not something that should be just done once and then kept as your commercialization slide for the next 5 years until you go to market. It should be something that is continuously part of your process of building, of growing as a company, and that should be constantly evolving, because you should be constantly challenging that with the conversations that you're having. Also, the market is advancing. The time it takes from when a founder first has an idea to the moment that they're able to launch a product on the market, a lot happens. Even though this industry is quite slow at actually adopting change and innovating, I think it should be something that is continuously kind of part of that process. And I think that's kind of our view with what we do at Digital Healthworks is this more holistic approach of, we're not just providing, okay, you need regulatory support, we're going to give you a regulatory package and buy. it's really this, we engage with our customers and we're partners for life. They're always part of our network, and we try and create this long-lasting relationship with them, because the reality is it takes that long to build a company successfully. And so just being able to check in, like, oh, by the way, this new reimbursement code just came out. We got to adjust because, it's either beneficial for us or some of the competitors are going to get ahead. Therefore, we should pivot. So I think it's more kind of incorporating that commercialization aspect and the regulatory, of course, but more so the market side as part of the continuously evolving journey of a venture.
Yeah, my perception is, especially, I mean, the medtech space, even more than also in other industries, building a company is always a little bit like shooting on a moving target, right? Because you have things like, for example, now many European companies now see that it probably makes sense to launch on the US market first, because the European regulatory processes are getting slower at the moment and so on. And they probably weren't prepared for that 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years ago, they might have thought to start on their home market first. And then they have to basically switch strategies in the process. And if they had stick to the initial plan, they would have failed because, I don't know, the timing that wouldn't be sufficient. So it's constantly, as you're saying, reiterating strategies and being aware of the changing landscape around you, both on the regulatory side, but also on commercial realities that exist.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And knowing where to look for the right information and making sure you're up to date is really important. Yeah.
What's your current thinking about that whole debate around starting in Europe first as a European medtech company compared to starting in the US first or doing both simultaneously? What are things you think about when discussing that with your clients, or things to consider?
Yeah, that's a good question and very relevant. I think I've been to 2 or 3 talks in the last 2 weeks based on talking about going to the US. So I think it's a really very relevant topic at the moment, especially given all the delays in the regulatory processes in Europe, and more so the unpredictability of these processes with the new MDR and IVDR regulations. So I think it always depends. It always depends. Obviously, it depends on the company, the product, the team behind it. But going to the US, I think it's often seen as kind of the holy grail of MedTech, because that is where there's, ching, 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 all these numbers, and there's a huge market opportunity there. But I think as Europeans, we tend to look at the US and see one big market, whereas it is actually broken down into, all the different states that have quite different, just can be culturally different. And they also have different legislation and different reimbursement opportunities in place, and different, laws of what kind of healthcare services are provided. So there is a big difference, and depending on what kind of technology you're developing, it may or may not make sense for you to go to the US or to a particular state or not. So, but at the same time, there's a big challenge that comes with going to the US. It's a completely, new market. I think having boots on the ground there to some extent is quite important. Having experienced team members who understand the US market, understand the US healthcare system especially, is very important. So at the moment it's interesting. We have a lot of clients who've come to us and that are looking exclusively at going to the US because their particular business model and product makes sense. Some of the digital health products, where at the moment Germany is a little bit tough to get into, they're going straight to the US. But essentially it's really a case by case that we evaluate, because it also depends where they have traction, where they've got their network. Sometimes they've got a great relationship with a big hospital in London, and they're able to run huge clinical trials that would be very important with big KOLs. And then in that point we sort of say, well, maybe your network is actually here in London. So yeah, I think it's very interesting. And I think, then there's also the other side of the debate where everyone's saying, in Europe, we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place and the ecosystem, and, we don't put too many regulatory guardrails in place, because all of the talent and all the good companies are going to the US at some point. So I do, yeah, there's kind of a bit of both sides to the discussion, but I think we're seeing a bit of everything at the moment.
Okay, med device folks, picture this. What if you could open up a CRM today and it already contained information for every potential lead for you in the country? And you could narrow down those leads further by looking at billing, location, seniority, so much more. Alpha Sophia is the strategy tool that we wish we had had when we were commercializing a medical device in the US market. But there's nothing stopping you. So visit alphasophia.com and learn more.
So it's, as you said, it's basically always, I mean, as always, a case-by-case decision. There's not the always US first or always Europe first path, but it's more like a case-by-case analysis where you're looking at what is already there, which network exists, is the product more fit for the regulatory pathways in a certain country, in a certain state? And then probably there are also other commercial realities, like where do I actually have patients for my solution? Where do I have practitioners who are interested in participating and being an early adapter for that product or solution? And in that due diligence process, where companies think about that market access strategy, data is probably a key input factor to do that due diligence and to make an educated decision, which then has the highest likelihood of success. What's your perception about the importance of data in that process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you just touched on it. Is data can help you de-risk whatever strategy you're looking at. Data can tell us, we can learn a lot about the past, what has been done. We can look at competitors, see how they've been approaching the same problem. And it can really help us predict what's going to happen in the near future. But essentially, it's, data is very important to de-risk whatever decisions we're taking. And obviously, as a scientist, I think that's been pretty ingrained in my personality and into the way that we approach business. Is we try and put numbers on everything, because that's, we can talk about the potential of the market and the total addressable market, but realistically, how many of those hospitals will be willing to purchase your technology? How many of them don't have a solution in-house? How many of them will be difficult to convert versus how many can we convert in the next 12 to 18 months, given the existing sales team and basically, force that we have today? So we really, try and put numbers on everything and estimate as close as we can to the reality of what's going to happen. And yeah, it just helps us understand the environment that we're moving into as well. And I think with data today, just the way, AI has just increased the way that we're able to absorb and deal with data and interpret it. So that's something that, obviously the impact it's having on the medical device industry directly is huge. I think I saw some stats that say that the AI in medical device industries is expected to grow by 40% in the next 5 or 6 years, which is crazy. But I think the way that AI can help us in just everything indirectly within the industry to digest huge amounts of information, all of these tools that help us sift through scientific publications faster and really pull out the key data points that we're looking for, is really, really interesting. And so, yeah, absolutely, these tools that are giving us access to this data is just incredibly helpful. We're just being faster and more powerful than ever, essentially.
And also, when I talk to our customers with Alpha Sophia, quite often we are told, wow, something like that didn't exist 10 years ago. And the ability to, slice and dice a market easily without the need of having a data scientist at hand, a BI team, but doing that in a small initial team of product and commercial leaders to understand the market opportunity, to make priorities right. And then in the end, our pitch always is with Alpha Sophia, you basically, it's a decision-making tool. Yeah, you you use that to make the right decision and spend your marketing and sales dollars on the right opportunities to then in the end get the biggest bang for the buck, then hit the next milestones and be able to further fundraise and roll out your products further. A little bit on a more overarching theme, what general trends do you see in MedTech and the digital health sector today and the next 10 years?
Yeah, that's an exciting question, and I've got like 10 things that come to mind, especially after the Frontiers Health conference that I was at in Berlin last week. But I think to not be generic and say AI, I think what I'm really noticing a lot of is patient empowerment. So patients, that are being more and more informed. We're wanting to take more ownership of our healthcare data, and I think if you look back, before the pandemic, nobody had ever done a lateral. I mean, I don't know what it was, but probably a tiny percentage of the population had done a lateral flow test. Whereas by the end of COVID, I think most of the population has done an at-home, self-administered lateral flow test where they're, collecting their own sample, they're mixing it with the reagent, and they're depositing it on the lateral flow strip. And that's something, as a biologist, blew my mind, because it's just so out of the ordinary, the normal conversation. Suddenly, all of my friends were immunologists and analyzing the way that COVID could potentially impact their health if they had other conditions or comorbidities, and just kind of figuring all of this out as we were, everyone in the entire world was navigating this pandemic at the same time. So I think that sort of triggered people in general to want to take more control of their health. And with the technologies that we see today, like wearables and remote patient monitoring solutions that are kind of, especially the ones that are integrating numerous inputs and different sources of information, like your heart rate, your SpO2, your activity levels, what you ate that day, taking those into account, those tools are extremely powerful to give us an indicator on our health. And I think it's making the population, I hope it's making the population, more aware of our health, and just empowering not only physicians to have a better access and deeper insight into the reality of lives of patients with chronic diseases, for example, but also understanding, when you ask your patient, so how much have you been smoking, or how much have you been drinking, and it's always just like, one glass of wine a week, but the reality is, you're probably having 10 every Friday night. So I think this concept of patient empowerment is something that I'm really enjoying watching the evolution, because it's not only affecting the industry and the way that we're engaging with our clients, but it's also affecting my friends and family around me, who are starting to really question, like, oh, my Oura ring is telling me this, or my Apple Watch said this about me, and I'm trying to lower my cholesterol, so I should do more activities, and I think this is really, really interesting to see, with the technologies that we're putting out today.
And that's really interesting, and I mean, it's in a time where, as you were mentioning, everyone is self-measuring themselves, gaining more data insights about themselves, and then being able to see trends, in both directions, if their health is increasing or decreasing. So that's, I fully agree. That's a really interesting trend. And I'm excited which shape and form that's going to take in 10, 15 years. There's always the downside of over-challenging practitioners, where people patients are not available anymore for the expert opinion of a practitioner, because they basically self-diagnose themselves overly self-diagnose themselves. But I fully agree with you, and it's going to be an interesting journey in that direction. Maybe one last closing question, or maybe like two closing questions. So first of all, what's your general advice if a founder, commercial leader of a MedTech startup at SMB asks you, what advice do you give me when embarking on that journey? Is there something overarching you think you would tell them to keep in mind? And then lastly, what's up next for you with Digital Health Networks? What's up in the next few months? Are there any plans you are having to go deeper into with your company?
Yeah, I think those are very good questions. And I think to answer your first one, honestly, if there was one overarching piece of advice I would say is just to make sure that once a month or once a quarter or whatever, as a leadership, you're taking a step back and you're pausing and just kind of taking a step back to look at, okay, where are we today? What have we achieved? And where are we going? Because I think so often, having been very deeply involved in startups myself, you get tunnel vision because you become so focused on your end goal that sometimes you don't listen to the noise and the changing environment around you. So I mean, obviously that's an ideal case scenario. What startup founder do I know that could take a minute to pause once a month? But I do think there's value in that, in the same way as for our mental health, taking a pause out of your day and just sitting quietly with no technology, no stimulation, that the impact that can have on our health. I think it's the same for the health of your company, is pausing, taking a step back, and I think that comes down to the support that we try and offer as consultants, as service providers in this industry. Is we don't know something that everyone else doesn't know. We're coming in and we're just providing a fresh view, the holistic approach. We're asking questions, and sometimes just by asking those questions, it triggers a change or a pivot or a realization of something within the company. So I think it's really just taking a step back, pausing, and making sure you're on the right track every now and then, because I think that can have lasting impact. And then, yes, your last question on what's next for Digital HealthWorks. The company is relatively young. We're only about a year and a half old officially. And so it's been a really interesting journey in the last few months. And I think, as we've started going to more and more in-person events, a lot of our theories and our sort of, the issues that we think we're helping to solve, that has been validated a lot. So that's been very encouraging. And I think, we're focusing on trying to provide this content as well for companies and for not only startups, but also for mid-size and larger corporates who are looking at innovating, because they're facing the exact same problems as startups trying to enter the market for the first time. So these mid-size and large companies, we're just trying to put out information that can be useful to them, whether that's through conferences. We organized the first series of our MedTech Unleashed event about 2 weeks ago in Berlin, along with 3 of our partners. So those were other service providers in the industry who provide things like design and manufacturing and engineering. So all different parts of the process of building a medical device. And so partnering closely with these other players in the ecosystem, I think, is also really, really interesting. And so we're hoping to have a few more, at least a number more installations of this MedTech Unleashed event in the next sort of maybe once or twice a year. So that's something that we're hoping to look out for, and we're looking forward to. So I think we're just, keeping our head down, doing a little bit, continuing to do what we've been doing. And, we've been lucky enough to work with some amazing clients in the last few months. So, just making sure that we're delivering, we're keeping up our quality and making a difference as we can is really what drives us. So.
Yeah, and I'm really excited for what's up next. And I'm definitely going to join the next MedTech Unleashed conference you're organizing. Really excited for that. Romy, thanks a lot for joining us today. It was a great pleasure, and lots of success for the future.
Thank you so much, Paul, and it's been great always working with you and hearing about Alpha Sophia and watching your incredible journey. So thank you so much for having me today, and speak to you soon.
Simple question. Can you afford to have a rep in every county, or do you need to be hyper-targeted in your outreach? Do you need to know information about your targets going in to be successful, or do you have years and years before you want to close that deal? If you want to be focused, if you want to deliver fast, you should visit alphasophia.com and help your sales team out.